In today's video, we're going to run down why the strategic reserve is important for the US and what it means to you and crypto. All right, so last week we had Trump sign it. He signed the executive order for a strategic reserve for Bitcoin here in the US, which is a promise that he made on the campaign trail. But I don't know that it means everything that Bitcoin maxis thinks it means. We're also going to get into why he tweeted about XRP, Solana, and ADA the Sunday before he signs this executive order, and then none of that was mentioned in the executive order. I mean, well, it kind of was with the stockpile, and we'll get into that too. So stick around, hang out, and we're going to run it all down. All right, so basically what the bill says is that they're going to take all of the confiscated Bitcoin that they still have, and they're going to use that as the strategic reserve here in the US. And Trump did say that they could buy more Bitcoin, but it can't be a cost to the taxpayer. So they've got to come up with some other ways that they can do that. The ways that I've thought through that this might make sense is if there are dams across the US that could use hydroelectric power, and maybe the US government could set up mining pools for Bitcoin. And there's excess energy that, they own the Hoover Dam. There's certain dams and power centers across the US that the US government has domain over or participates in. And there's a potential way that they could divert some of that energy that's used there into a Bitcoin mining mechanism. And that's a way that they could participate and earn more Bitcoin and continue to stockpile it for the reserve. But I really don't see, there's not a whole lot of other resources for them to be able to purchase Bitcoin, right? Now for the stockpile, that's a bit different. They gave some leeway there that they could negotiate things or do other things to be able to pull in those other assets. And they did say that they are going to bring in other digital assets into the stockpile, which I think will include ADA, XRP, maybe some Solana, things that they think are going to be a systemic importance or of systemic importance. And I think that this was more of a put than a call on Bitcoin. It's kind of like, well, just in case we're wrong about this thing, maybe we should fold it in. And that's kind of how Trump talked about it. In most of the circumstances when he's been discussing this, even when he was signing the executive order, he was like, oh, we promised this. Okay, this seems like a good idea. We'll just go ahead and sign across the dotted line here. And then when he was talking about it at the crypto summit on Friday, he said, Bitcoin holders say not to sell their Bitcoin, and they've been right up to this point, but who really knows? Those were almost his words verbatim. So I don't know that the US government or Trump is oversold on Bitcoin, that it is the end all be all of digital assets. I think that there are some other things going on behind the scenes. We know that many of the other companies and CEOs and people that are advocating for certain networks are meeting with Trump on a regular basis, and at least they're open to it, right? This is the first administration really that's been pro crypto. There's bipartisan support for regulation in the space. He did state that we're going to see stablecoin regulations by August of this year at the crypto summit this last week as well. And so I think that that's really awesome for the space. And I think that we're going to see the appreciation, and certain networks are going to get included. The working group is still in that 180-day period where they're going to decide what the other assets in the stockpile are going to be. And I think that depending on how the next, 30, 60, 90 days work out for different assets and their utility or adoption or appreciation, some of those things could change dramatically. The main wild card that I think a lot of people are anticipating the US government to use here, or maybe Ripple to use to include XRP in the strategic reserve or the stockpile, most likely the stockpile at this point, is the escrow that Ripple holds. And Ripple does hold, 48 billion XRP in the escrow. And there's a potential that the US government could say, hey, let's settle up those fines from the SEC case, which it's still the only one outstanding, which is crazy to me. The SEC has dismissed all of the other cases by regulation, by enforcement that were under the Biden administration, except for Ripple versus the SEC and the appeal that's been put forth there, even after they got the judgment of $125 million that Ripple would owe the SEC for damages, which, you can have your opinions there. I have mine. So Anyway, but I think that is a way that they could say, hey, let's just take this 125 million from Ripple. Let's, instead of cash that they put in the escrow, let's take it from them in XRP. So that'd be around 50 million XRP right now at the current value. You also have the instance that Ripple met with the Fed back in 2014. Greg Kidd was like the fourth or fifth employee at Ripple, and he orchestrated that meeting. And so what was discussed back then? Right? Was there an allocation? There's 1,700 NDAs that Ripple has across the globe with financial institutions, enterprises, and potentially governments. And the US government could be one of those NDAs that already has an allocation to XRP. And that was one of the things that the crypto czar mentioned just recently in an interview. He stated that we haven't audited what crypto the government owns. We just know that they've confiscated that Bitcoin. And so we need to go through a full audit of what the US government actually owns. And then based on those results, it's likely that we would include some of those assets in the stockpile. And so I think as they go through the audit, they might find out that the US government already owns some XRP. And it might be a pretty good chunk, just depending on, those NDAs and what that actually looks like. Or there could be a pre-allocated price or negotiated price between Ripple and the US government from back in the day that maybe they can claim or pick up. So I do think that XRP will be included in the stockpile here in the US. I think it'll need to be. And I think that that escrow that Ripple holds is likely going to play a role in how that happens. And maybe even a lawsuit, right? There's a lot of things up in the air. But I'm really bullish on some of these other assets being included in the strategic reserve. Hopefully HBAR gets some recognition. I think that one's a prominent asset that probably should be included. XLM, XDC. There's some other things that I think the US government should probably be looking at aside from Bitcoin, now that Tether has moved offshore, but that's another topic. So hopefully this has been valuable for you. I think that XRP is definitely going to get included. Bitcoin's obviously there, and that there will be many others that the US government looks at in the next 180 days before they decide what's in the actual stockpile. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Is ADA going to make it in there? Is Sol going to make it in there? Is ETH going to make it in there? I know that, Trump mentioned Bitcoin and ETH after he tweeted about XRP, Solana, and ADA. So it's all kind of up in the air. Again, I don't think Trump's overly sold on Bitcoin, just how he's talked about it. But I would love to hear your comments again below. Please like, subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.